Well, Angela, we're going to rap a little while about a number of things, but I guess one of the most important things that we can start off talking about is the fact that you have been called a revolutionary, a militant. Uh, Much of the media has pictured you this way. It's talked about all over the world. What do you see as the meaning of the term revolutionary?
Well, there's no single simple meaning of the term revolutionary. A revolutionary is a man or a woman who is a lot of things, but basically, the revolutionary wants to change the nature of society in a way to promote a world where the needs and interests of the people are responded to. A revolutionary realizes, however, that in order to create a world where human beings can live and love and be healthy and create, you have to completely revolutionize the entire fabric of society. You have to overturn the economic structure where you have a few individuals who are in possession of the vast majority of the wealth in this country that's been produced by the majority of the people, and you have to destroy this political apparatus which, under the guise of revolutionary government, perpetrates the most incredible misery on the masses of people.
One of the interesting things about the term revolutionary is the fact that people, so many people, see it in the context of violence, that revolutionary means violence. Violence every day, every minute, at any given time, no matter what the circumstances. How do you view this in the context of violence?
Well, of course, that's part and parcel of the same attempt to separate and isolate revolutionaries from the people. Of course, revolution does not mean violence in the sense that that's its defining characteristic.
Yet there are those who see it
Revolution,
that way.
well, and that's done in a very conscious manner to mislead people and to lead people to, for instance, equate a progressive socialist revolution with fascism. During the time that I was out in the streets and speaking throughout California, I found it incredible how many people define socialism or communism as if it were the Third Reich.
Yeah.
Uh, Certainly, of course, though, in the history of revolutions, and not only socialist revolutions, but bourgeois democratic revolutions also, the American Revolution, for instance, you have had um, the occurrence of violence as a means of seizing power from the oppressor. But why?
Yeah.
This is because the oppressors have failed to um, acknowledge the fact that the people were right and that the people had the right to control their lives and to control their destinies. And they are the ones who always initiate the violence. If people are serious about moving ahead to create a better society, then of course they should not allow themselves to be deterred simply because a few people at the top, who are in possession usually of monopoly on violence, decide that they're going to unleash all of their forces of repression to stop them.
Angela, the interesting thing I think that's emerged is your struggle with the Soledad Brothers and your struggle with the Soledad trial. How did you get involved in this whole area of demonstrating and of speaking and of organizing for the Soledad Brothers?
I was invited in the spring of 1970 to attend a meeting that had been organized by some of the attorneys involved in the Soledad Brothers case. The meeting was held in Los Angeles. I attended that meeting, and there I assumed the responsibility for doing a certain amount of organizing, primarily on the campuses, because I was at UCLA at the time, to uh, inform the people as to what was happening to George Jackson, John Clouchet, and Fleeta Drumgo.
Mm-hmm. Uh, how this affected you a great deal because you participated very strongly in it. You became extremely close to one of the participants of Soledad Brothers, namely George Jackson. What was George Jackson really like?
Well, I became very close to the um, members of George's family in the process of trying to organize around the Soledad Brothers Defense Committee. Um, all of George's family, Jonathan, Mrs. Jackson, Mr. Jackson, and George and Jonathan's sisters, who were all extremely beautiful and extremely strong people. They were all involved in the political activity around the case. I did come to have um, a certain amount of contact, primarily indirect, of course, with George. The only time I saw him was at a hearing I attended in Salinas. Um, but it was almost impossible not to see the strength and the love that George Jackson had within himself, a love that expressed itself in a million different ways, a love for his people, a love for oppressed people, a love for all the people with whom he had any contact. All he used to call them all the innocents, all the people who had not already actively aligned themselves with the forces of oppression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I remember reading one of his letters. In fact, I read his book, but one of the letters where he said that he had no self, he had no image, he had no ears, no eyes. He went on to talk about this, but some of the most interesting letters were the ones that you and George exchanged. They were very moving letters. You've undoubtedly had some kind of understanding as people who were struggling together. Well, were there some common strings there that in the struggle that you felt very strongly about, you and George?
Well, George was a revolutionary. Uh, George considered himself a communist revolutionary, and he felt that his revolutionary beliefs and the struggles that he had to wage were far more important than his own life. That's why he spent 11 years in prison
Yeah.
for a crime that was,
What was
so
it, $70?
insignificant, $70. And if he had had at that time a good lawyer, and if racism had not been what it was, he never would have been in prison in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's what was so ridiculous about it. But it was not, I don't think that I would say that George was lacking in a personal image. That was one of the things that was so beautiful and so incredible about him, that he was able to perfectly merge his political life with his personal life. There was no conflict between the two, and the one was very much enhanced by the other. Within his political struggles, there was a very profound personal love and identity and solidarity with all his sisters and brothers, with all his comrades. Then every personal relationship he had was determined by and infused with the struggle for liberation.
The interesting thing about it is the fact that George Jackson was killed August 21st. And at that particular time, we saw some new directions occur in the prison system. For instance, there was the Attica, there was San Quentin. How do you perceive the penal institutions at this particular time in regards to what they call rehabilitation and other directions that they may be taking now that the death of George has occurred and Attica has broken loose and possibly other prisons as well?
Well, things have been festering under the surface in the prison system for a long time. In fact, when I became involved with the Soledad Brothers Defense Committee in Los Angeles, at first we simply took it upon ourselves to defend George Jackson, John Fouché, and Fleeta Drumgo. But we later realized that the question was much broader than that. It wasn't simply a matter of three individuals who were being subject to the repressive forces of the penal system. It was the system itself that had to be attacked. It was the system itself that had to be abolished. So that we eventually broaden the field of our activities to include an assault on the prison system as a whole.
Well, what you're strongly implying, I gather, then, is that the character of justice is not really changing that much, even though recently we've seen Bobby Seale, Erica Huggins, Huey Newton just recently, who have been freed. Is the character of justice really changing that much?
Well, what is justice? I mean, what does justice mean? Does justice simply mean that a person who has been charged with a crime is going to be acquitted? I mean, that's what happened, of course, to Erica and Bobby and Huey and the New York 21, and partially in the case of the LA Panthers, who were just recently on trial. They were acquitted, or the charges dismissed against them, but that appears to me to be a purely formalistic view of what justice is. It's empty. It has no content. If you can pick out someone, single a black person, a black revolutionary out, charge him with an unbailable offense, put him or her in jail for 2 years, 2.5 years, is in the case of the New York 21, I think. And then afterwards, get up with the case that you have that doesn't have any water at all, and have the jury acquit them. Is that what justice is all? They've lost years of their life. See, what has happened in those cases is that the black revolutionary leaders have been effectively silenced. They have been separated from their people, isolated from the community for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years.
You see, this is a contrived, calculated effort on the part of the powers to be, the ruling class, to make sure that they are separated from their people.
Well, see, there are a lot of ways in which repression can express itself. It does not necessarily mean being shot down. It does not even necessarily mean being sentenced to prison. It can mean being detained for so long that one cannot be effective in the community. It can mean being forced into exile, as Eldridge Cleaver was forced into exile, and we see what has happened to Eldridge and what his exile has meant for his ability to be effective in the black liberation struggle here. There are a myriad of ways in which you can repress a developing liberation movement.
I guess the thing that concerns me very much has to do with those unnamed blacks, Chicanos, Asians, Indians, poor people who go to the courts every day, who are sentenced. And in fact, we don't read about them. We don't know about them. They are imprisoned. It's like, as someone suggested some time ago, that so many people in prison did not really have the kind of adequate legal counsel that they needed. Time after time, we have been told that people who are going before the courts have been told to plead guilty, and they'd only get 3 months. And of course, this meant an extensive amount of time in prison. But I've heard you talk about the nameless prisoners who have no recourse because they did not have adequate representation.
One of the things that is so incredible, and I don't imagine that most people are aware of this fact. I myself wasn't aware of it until recently. Of all the people who are arrested in this country and charged with crimes, only 1% are ever tried by a jury. Only 1% are ever tried by a jury, which means that the vast majority of people in this country who are brought before a court either end up pleading guilty on the advice of a public defender who doesn't have the time, who does not identify with his client, who has the interests of an overcrowded court system uppermost in his mind. He counsels them to plead guilty, and they, as you said, he tries to make a deal. Sometimes that doesn't work.